Hi everybody and welcome to the next Marshall Monday. Today we're going to the University of East Anglia in Norwich. Very excited for this. We have 3 Marshall Scholars going this year. Count that, 3 Marshall Scholars going to the University of East Anglia this year. One to study climate change and the other 2 to do creative writing, which are wonderful strengths of the university. Anyway, I'm not going to talk very long. I'm just going to hand it over to Alana, who can tell you all about it. Thank you, Alana.
Hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you for taking the time out of your day to attend the session. We are really sad that you couldn't make it to campus, but we know that hopefully in the future you'll be able to make it. So just to show an agenda for what's going to happen today, we're going to have some welcome and introductions. There's going to be a brief welcome video. I'm going to go over some general information about the University of East Anglia, and then we're going to have a creative writing workshop with Dr. Jean Mcneil, as well as a current MFA student, Stephanie Tam. And then we're going to have a little bit of a reflection from Stephanie about her time at UEA. And then finally, we will close with a Q&A session. So that's how today is going to go. I think we're set to go to about 1:15 p.m. Eastern time. So hopefully that will get you out right on time. So without further ado, let me introduce myself. My name is Alana Stewart. I am the regional manager for the University of East Anglia for the USA and Canada. I'm actually based in Michigan, so I'm one of those regional admissions counselors that's lucky enough to be right in your backyard. I did attend the NAFA conference last year, so maybe you might recognize my face from that conference, and hopefully we will all be able to see each other in person next year at the next NAFA conference. And thanks again to Luann, Mary, and everyone at NAFA for putting this on. We really appreciate this opportunity to get in front of people and have people learn about more opportunities in the United Kingdom, such as the University of East Anglia. So Jean, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi there. Yes, thanks everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I am Jean Mcneil. The reason I'm here is to do a creative writing workshop with you and hopefully give you some insight, admittedly a very kind of whistle-stop tour, insight into what it's like to do that, and therefore a kind of open up a door perhaps to our program and how we work. And I'm very happy to take questions about that at the end, and Stephanie will reflect, and I'll do a slight intro to that before we get going. So I'm really looking forward to that. Thanks, Alana.
And Stephanie, just a brief introduction.
Sure. Yes. I was born and raised in New York, and I am now actually based in Norwich. But before that, I was doing podcast producing. So I've worked as a radio journalist for Freakonomics and Radiolab. And before that, I explored my love for storytelling and social sciences through actually the Daniel Sachs Scholarship at the University of Oxford. So did 2 years of study there. And my undergraduate was in English literature at Princeton. So yeah, that's, I guess, basics.
All right, so now we are going to move ahead to a video that was recorded by our Pro Vice Chancellor.
Hello, my name is Neil Ward and I'm the Deputy Vice Chancellor of the University of East Anglia in Norwich, and I'd like to welcome
Alana, we've lost the volume, no noise at all.
We will just skip that, I think, unless it's because I unmuted myself, but I don't think that would be the cause of that. So we're just going to skip that video. I apologize for that. That was just a nice intro video coming from one of our pro-vice chancellors, just basically welcoming you all to campus, well, virtually to our campus, and hoping that these connections can follow through, especially with important fellowship advisors such as yourself that work with students that we'd love to have on campus. As Mary mentioned, we do have 3 Marshall Scholars coming this year, which is insane. And then also we've had a Fulbright every single year coming, at least I know since I've been at UEA, which has been about 4 years now. So I am going to go over a little about the general information about the University of East Anglia. We have a map here of where UEA is located. So we are located in the southeast area, about an hour and a half northeast of London by train. So we kind of are in that nice little nook that's over there. I kind of like to think it's our own little oasis. We do have our own international airport, so it is easy for students to get to Norwich. Typically the layover would be in Amsterdam, and then you fly back over to Norwich to get here. So it's easily accessible. You also have the trains from London, and not to mention the buses if you do opt to travel from London. And then we also have the beautiful countryside there. As I said, I feel like we're in our own little oasis there. We're one of the larger cities that's in the area, about 30 minutes from the coast. So students have the opportunity to go to the beach if they would like to. And then finally, our population is relatively small. So the population is about 132,000 people. So while we like to think that, you know, it's a smaller city, we've had students that have come from London who say they have everything they need in Norwich, which I think speaks volumes. It's also a shopping destination for a lot of people in the area. So again, you do have everything that you need. It's also very safe. So not just in terms of, you know, any crime or activity like that, but we also have been relatively safe from a lot of COVID cases. So I know that's very important for students to be looking at right now, but because of the nature of where UEA is located in the county of Norfolk and in the city of Norwich, that's been nice to have, again, a relatively low number of cases comparatively, especially to some of the rest of England. Also, one of the things that we like to talk about, it's a very vegan-friendly place. So again, even for a smaller city, the students still have this wide variety of opportunity and experience that they can get. And it's one of the things that we think sets UEA apart. So when people ask us to talk about what makes UEA special, Norwich, the location, is one of those things that's constantly spoken about in relation to the university. And I think that the university and the community are very well intertwined with one another. So then on the next slide, we just have a general introduction to the University of East Anglia with a few points on there. We also are showcasing our very new building on campus, which opened up this past summer. It's called the New Science Building, which I think they need to work on the name a tiny bit, but it is adeptly named because it is a brand new science facility for our students. We were founded in 1963. So while we are a relatively young university, we like to say that we've done pretty well in those years since our founding. I'll talk about some of the rankings a little bit further on, but we are a public campus-based research university. So everything students need is kind of in the same area, basically like a campus that you would find in the United States, just plunked down in the city of Norwich. We also offer a wide variety of subject areas under 4 faculties and 23 different schools. So while I'll be highlighting a couple of these, and obviously we're highlighting creative writing here, there are a ton of different subject areas for your students to go into and a lot of different areas to investigate. So outside of these bigger areas, please make sure that you're checking to see if we have what your student would need, because I would say we do offer quite a bit of what the students are interested in studying. We do have undergraduate and postgraduate degrees. We know that people for NAFA are particularly interested in the postgraduate options. So that's postgraduate taught, which are 1-year master's degrees, and we have the postgraduate research, which are typically 3-year PhD programs at the university level. And then finally, we have about 17,000 students on our campus, of which about 21% are international from a wide variety of countries around the world. So again, for being a smaller location, we do have a lot of international students that come into the university and help to make the place very diverse. On the next slide, we just have a bunch of different rankings kind of spattered in there, just talking about where we place. Typically speaking, we're about top 25 in the UK, and we're world top 200. So that establishes us pretty well. So we know that a lot of people may not have heard of University of East Anglia, but I always assure you that these rankings do help to establish us as a university that you should be investigating and should be comfortable sending your students to, because we do have very good teaching, very good research. You see there that we're 44th in research citations in the world, which is very impressive. And then we also have those different rankings going on, and also the Teaching Excellent Framework of Gold, which is the highest ranking that you can get. That is set, I think, to be renewed within the next year or so. So hopefully we'll keep that gold ranking up there. So that's why it's from 2017. They only do it every so often. But again, these just hope to establish UEA as a place that is reputable and is a place where you should be sending your students. Now, in terms of top subjects that we have to offer, these are the ones that were ranked by The Guardian for 2020 within the top 15. A lot of our subjects, I feel, tend to be in the top 20, top 25, but these are just the ones that are a little bit notable in that top 15. So you have economics, which is 4th, education, which is also 4th, international development, which I like to talk about. We do get quite a bit of interest for international development, especially from the States, and that is very cross-disciplinary. So students can have a wide variety of options within international development, such as water security, education, gender equity, different areas in international development that they can specialize in. We're also 9th for law, as well as accounting and finance. So if you have any business-minded students, that goes along with business, marketing, and management, which is ranked within the 12th, which is ranked 12th. So as you can see, again, we do have quite a few subject areas that are ranked very well. Again, across the board, you're going to run into professors who are doing top research in their field, and getting a lot of those research citations, which is why we're ranked so well in the world. But they are doing that, again, top of the line, earth-breaking, earth-shattering type of research that your students will want to be involved in and want to be associated with. So then finally, in terms of what we're known for, this is the last piece. We will hear from Dr. Jean Mcneil a little bit about this more, but we had the first creative writing course in the UK. So of course, when you're talking about creative writing in the UK, UEA should always be mentioned. The second bit of that is the environmental science research that we do, especially in terms of climate change. So that's another, I believe we had one of the first schools, if not the first school of environmental science in the UK. So again, that's just another thing we're known for. I don't think here in the US we're known for that quite as much, but that's not to say, again, that that's not an area that your students shouldn't be investigating. It's just something that we want to get the word out about in the US to make sure that your students are considering us as well. And then our most popular majors: health sciences, business, and education. I don't know if that's too shocking for anybody to necessarily hear about in terms of where students just end up lying in terms of what they're studying, but those are the most popular ones. And then the other thing that we're known for, or at least we should be known for, are generous scholarships, especially in comparison to some of what the other universities are offering. We do have an International Excellence Scholarship that's worth £4,000 for the year. That's for our postgraduate taught, so our master's students. And then we also have a wide array of course-specific scholarships. I know Jean will have a list of those later for creative writing. However, it's worth noting that these are not going to be stacked on top of Fulbright and Marshall, so any scholarships you see here today, again, will not stack, so they won't be in addition to the Fulbright or Marshall, which are full. But that's still to say, if any of your students are not successful in Fulbright or Marshall, they could still apply and still get these generous scholarships that we have to offer. And then finally, I like to mention that we have brand new facilities that are coming onto campus. So I mentioned the new science building that is there on campus and fully opened. We also have the Institute of Productivity, which is coming up, and that's an engineering facility with state-of-the-art equipment, multi-million-dollar facility, and that's going to be used by both the community and our students. So that's going to allow the community and our students to integrate with each other. And then finally, we have an arts and humanities building called the Sky House, which is being built, and it should be opening hopefully in 2022. And again, that's for arts and humanities and some of our social science. But I like to mention this only because it's always nice to see investment in infrastructure in a university, and nice to see that it's not remaining stagnant and that there is investment being made that's going to be affecting your students and where they study and the type of degree that they're going to get. So with this, I will like to pass it on to Jean, who will then be going over the creative writing course, and then also doing her workshop.
Great, Alana, thank you so much. That's a really practiced introduction, and I'm not sure I can follow that very classy act. So, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a very, very brief, because I'd like us to get on to doing something. It's going to be a learn by doing session. And what I'm going to signal to Alana, she's actually going to change the slides for me. So when you hear me asking her, that's the reason. So here's our lovely campus. The campus is actually, I think, quite, well, it's a major part of UEA experience. It's within nature. We have a very good reputation for writing about nature in Norwich, Norfolk, and more widely. And the campus is extremely serene and beautiful and architecturally fascinating. So as we know, when we're doing creative arts, our surroundings, the time and place of doing it are become part and parcel of the doing of it. It's not like other subjects, perhaps, in that sense. Thanks, Alana. If we could go to the next slide. So now, bear with us. We're just going to do a little bit of intro here you have an exclusive introduction and reflection on what it was like studying creative writing at the very beginning in 1970 from Ian McEwan. And then I'm going to come to a present day student. And all in all, this is just a minute from Ian and a minute from our present day student whose name is Alana Gillian Lloyd. Ian McEwan perhaps needs no introduction. So just bear with me and I'll get up this video for you. This is quite an exclusive. Nobody else has seen this, as far as I know, just me and you, and the person who made it. So I'll just put it full screen. Sorry.
And saw in this brochure that I could do an MA in comparative literature with a little bit of creative writing thrown in. And within 2 minutes, I was talking to Malcolm Bradbury. I showed him a story or two I'd written, and he said, well, okay, come. I arrived, I guess, sort of early September 1970, took a room on the Newmarket Road in a very nice big house. And I remember clearly thinking that I would not leave this room until I'd written a short story. The very next morning, I typed out the story I'd written, about 5,000 or 6,000 words. It was called A Conversation with a Cupboard Man. It turned out to be my first published story. And then I began a very interesting year. I remember Malcolm.
Okay, that's Ian. A story of the ease with which he produced his first short story, which is I'm very jealous about.
We have this.
Here's
read what they know. They only want to read about characters that look like that, or they only want to read about characters from places that they're from. And I don't think that's been true. I'm going to put my neck out and say that I hope that there will just simply be more voices, more great stories, more ways of imagining better futures.
Great. So that's the past and the present of our course. And now I'm just going to ask Alana to go back to the PowerPoint presentation and change the slide, please. Thanks. So Norwich, yes, Norwich has an excellent literary reputation, and this is actually quite unusual in England. There's only one other city of literature. There's about 40 now cities of literature all around the world, which means it has been recognized for its contribution to literature more broadly. Next slide, thanks. Our creative writing program is 50 years old this year, which we're very excited about. We have an enormous plan and indeed schedule and calendar of activities that we're going to enact to celebrate this. all of which, many of which are now having to happen online. So this has been quite something for us, like steering a big ocean liner and turning it around into the virtual world. But as Ian McEwan intimated, there really wasn't a discipline of creative writing in this country until 50 years ago, until 1970. It's very different, of course, in the United States, where the Iowa Workshop Program came out of the post-war education scenario, which many people were demobilized, and universities became more adventurous about combining academic and creative subjects. So we actually have that kind of lineage. We are, if you will, the Iowa Writers' Workshop of the United Kingdom. Thanks, Ilana. Next slide. Here's the past. Both of those images are Malcolm Bradbury teaching students, and not a great deal has changed. We still do that. We still sit in rooms and we talk about writing in progress. We now have a bit more of a formal scenario. You'll see Malcolm sitting around actual tables with students. So next slide, please, Alana. We were very honored to have Margaret Atwood with us. And she was in, judging by the students, that's 2013, 2014 year. She was the UNESCO City of Literature professor. She was remarkably generous with the students and indeed with us. And also at the bottom, we hosted, you'll see a couple of images, we hosted a Chevening Scholarships Day for Chevening students from all around the world. Globalization, diversity, multinationalism is a very, very important aspect of our creative writing program. There is no other program in the UK that has anywhere near the nationality-wise diversity that we do at UEA. We have sometimes 50% of our cohort is from overseas, and part of the reason we're able to attract those students is because we have a generous roster of scholarships. Alana, next slide, thanks. We're not a kind of resting upon your laurels university. We like to think about the future, and in fact UEA was always founded on the project of doing different, of being a different kind of institution, of really remaking society. And so part of our 50th anniversary is looking to what will the future of literature be. So we're working with new technology, with immersive experience. And this is, again, a capacity that very few universities, I can't think of maybe only one other institution in the UK that has the institutional capacity to engage in large-scale multidisciplinary projects like this. Next slide, please. These are our programs. Stephanie obviously has done and is doing the MFA. I teach on the MA. What I'm going to do with you today is a little bit like what we do on the MA, but I can answer questions later about all our programs, but just to say we have a wide provision for creative writing. Next slide, thanks, Elena. This is a long list. I won't show you this slide for very long, but just so you can see, we are very well supported by donors from around the country and indeed around the world. And it means that we can attract the very best students to our programs. Next slide. So yeah, that's it. This is a screenshot from our alumni page. And if you have time, I would urge you to have a look, because it's actually it's enormously impressive to see what our students and some of our staff as well are on there. If they've been students, they are on there. For example, I wasn't a student at UEA, so I don't appear on there. Yeah, so thank you so much. Okay, so now, the moment you've all been waiting for. Alana, if I can, I'm just gonna take over now, if we can put the PowerPoint away, or if not, it's not a big deal. Okay, so everyone, I'm just going to tell you what we're about to do now. And if anybody does have any urgent questions, I'm going to give you a chance to ask them, either in the chat box, which I've got in front of me. But what we're going to do is we're going to write. And I realize everybody is very busy, and I totally understand perhaps the allure of tuning out, but I'm going to ask you to do this because I think that it will be interesting for you. And I think things might come up which in the writing and in the thinking, which are valuable to you. So I'm thinking really here of you, not of me. But what I'm going to do is ask you to do 2 distinct exercises. This won't take very long. We'll be at it for 15 minutes. And then we'll do some feedback. I'm trying, of course, to replicate a creative writing workshop in a condensed format. And also, I would much rather have you in the room doing this. It would be so much fun, but we're going to try it. And I've done it before and I know it works. So all I would ask you is to get ready to write. And what you need, I'm going to do this too, is you need a paper and pen, or don't panic. If you don't have that, you can do it on the laptop. That's absolutely fine. We're all muted. I think that's fine. Most of us have our cameras off. I'm going to tell you what to do. And then there'll be a 3-minute interval when we write. And then I'm going to ask you all to come back. I'll mute myself while I'm writing. I'll unmute myself and I'll ask you to stop. And it's actually very important that you do stop when I ask you to stop, that you actually take your pen off the page or stop typing. It's really important not to go on. I'll explain why later. And then I'll give you a second mini task to do, okay? So same thing after that. It's a time task. It'll be about 5 minutes. Then I'll say, okay, everybody, stop there. And then we'll all come back. And then what I am going to need some brave individuals to do is to give us all some feedback, either to read a short section of what you've written, or just tell us what it was like writing, what you thought of, what you expected to happen, perhaps what you didn't expect to happen. So do I have any immediate questions? If you could please put your hand up if you've got any questions about what we're doing and how. Okay, I don't see anything. That's good news. Right. So I'm going to show you a picture. This picture is not random. Last week I escaped the UK and I went to the Salvador Dali Museum, amongst other things, and other places in Figueras in northern Spain. Yeah, Dali's work, I re-encountered it. So this is a painting by Salvador Dali. I will show it to you on the screen. What I want you to do, first of all, is to write one word that occurs to you from that painting. You'll see it's an abstract painting. So it could be a word about color. It could be about what the painting says to you personally. It could be emotion. Just really the first word that comes into your mind. And I want you to write that down on your pad or type it out on your screen. Okay, so let's do that now. I'll give you about 30 seconds to do that. And then I'll tell you what comes next. So here's the painting. I think everybody can see that. So don't think about it too much, just write down a word. I've got my word. I hope everybody has theirs. Again, let me know if there's any issues. So there's the Dali. Okay, so your task is, I'm going to ask you to write without stopping for 3 minutes. It's very important that you don't stop. I'll tell you when the 3 minutes are up. And this word that is on your page or on your screen is your kind of, my word is probably not legible, but it's flank. I'll tell you that just because it's good to have an example. That is your guide word. When you start writing, you're writing maybe in dialogue with that word. If you get stuck, go back to that word. And the most important thing is you don't stop. So I'm going to do it and we're all going to start now. Okay, everybody, if you could stop. Thanks. Okay, like I said, it's really important where you stop, and we'll discuss that later. Is everybody all right? Has everyone done it? Any questions? Did that feel like 3 minutes? That's the interesting question. Okay, thanks. I've got the thumbs up here for a few people. Time and concentration are obviously very crucial in writing, as is a kind of going into a kind of meditative state where you allow things to happen, that in a more kind of willed frame of mind, as in, I must do this, I must write this, I'm writing this for this reason. Once you relinquish that will, I think you begin to get onto the groove or the track of your actual mind. You're listening to yourself through this exercise. So I'm just going to ask now if anyone would like to offer some quick feedback from doing this. It's called automatic writing, by the way, if you want a name to call it. So if anybody is prepared to say whether they found it difficult or easy, time passed quickly or slowly, and indeed maybe even read a bit, if you could unmute yourself and say so. There must be some extroverts out there. Janice. I have Janice here on my screen. Janice. Hi, Janice.
Well, my word was blood, and that was a great exercise just to have a word, because it launched me. I would say it went extremely fast, the time, and I just wrote about this horse charging into battle, and the blue and the green of tranquility in the countryside fading away in the to conflict and conquest, and then the blood haunting us. That's how I ended. The world continued to haunt us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's such a powerful word, and I can see where it came from in the painting. But do you think is there a relationship with what you're thinking of now in your life as well? Or yeah.
Yeah, so I'll confess, I've spent years in Spain and have studied Spanish history, and so I do think of the history of violence and the hope of moving beyond it. So, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I mean, you think of Don Quixote, and there's so many different paintings and renditions in Spanish art from Goya onwards of horses, of this very iconic situation of the man and the horse going into battle. And but also, of course, horses are such a benign, beautiful, elegant animal. And so there's, you know, automatically all these conflicts are set up in these iconographic ways in that painting. Yes, thank you, Janice. That's really great. That's really interesting. Thank you. And I'm having some comments come through the chat. Everybody's saying, seemed longer, it felt shorter, it felt very fast. And then I've got from Josh, he just says, no. Oh, no, that's something else. But sees, yeah, sees, I was worried that meant no, I can't do it. Okay, I mean, time is obviously, you know, I put you under pressure in time, but look what you can write in 3 minutes. It's quite, yeah, imagine doing that for an hour every day. You actually generate a huge amount of text. Thank you, Janice. Would anyone else like to come in before we go on to part 2?
Hi.
Hi there.
Strangely, my word was blood too.
Ooh, it's strange.
Although I think for me, it was the picture and the word blood kind of took me to a place thinking about what happens on the way to change and how change can be painful, and whether the change is moving towards something good or bad, whether it's quest for power or conquest for the pursuit of righteousness, that change can lead to war, which can lead to bloodshed, which can be very painful. I'm not saying that blood is necessary for change, definitely not, but that blood can be a metaphor for the pain that is felt as change is happening. I actually strangely felt like I had more time than I thought, which was odd. So I really liked this exercise because often I feel like I don't have enough time, but this made me feel like I had more somehow by being so focused.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is about focus. I mean, I think some people, of course, feel that it's too little time to write anything of any consequence. But as I said, I don't think that's true. And I think this exercise shows that just underneath the surface, we are thinking about these things. I mean, what you're thinking about is effectively epochal change, is about war. You're thinking on a kind of very dramatic, epic scale, and just by dipping underneath the surface, like putting a needle into water, we've just punctured the meniscus of seeming tranquility in which all these thoughts are there. And particularly, you could argue at this moment in history in which we're all really suddenly living, in fact, on that epic canvas. And the word blood is, of course, it's a very charged word, there's no doubt. And if we were doing a real workshop, I would interrogate your language, and later on I'm going to ask somebody to read their actual piece, hopefully, and then we can talk about the language itself. But we have to remember that there are words that are particularly charged for us. In fact, charging is another word that could easily come out of that painting. They have an electricity. Language is alive. Yeah, thank you so much for your thoughts. Okay, so now what we're going to do, everybody, is we're going to do the second exercise, which is not too dissimilar, but I'm going to give you a little bit more time. Not a lot more time, I have to say, probably about five minutes. But again, I'd like you to just have a go at it, please. So I want you to think about yesterday, not today. This is the only rule. It has to be something to do with yesterday. Something that happened, something you saw, something you perhaps overheard, an experience within your home, without your home. But the most important thing is it happened then. And in terms of that experience, I want you to come up with one word, again, that is related to that experience. So let's just do that for a sec. I'll tell you what my word is in a bit, just as an exemplar. Okay, I hope everybody has a word now. It's not super important what the word is. My word is heart. So our exercise now is in 5 minutes. I want you to turn that word into a story, a very short story, obviously, so you've only got 5 minutes. I would like you to just write whatever you think it might be a story or the beginning of a story, and then we're going to think about how you've gone about that when we're finished, okay? So I'll tell you when to stop. Thanks. Okay, everybody. If we can, we're just a couple of seconds short of 5 minutes, but if we could just stop there. Right, thank you again. Thank you for doing this. So what I'd like to do is some brave soul, if they would be willing to read, if only just a few lines of what they've written. And what we're going to talk about now is the aspect of story, of how you actually create a story and reflect on that. But I'd love it, really appreciate it if somebody could read just a little bit of their work. I mean, I can, if we're desperate, I can read mine, but it's, and it's not supposed to be great literature. So please remember that there's no wrongs or rights in this. So who shall be our brave volunteer? I know there's somebody there.
I'll give it a go.
Oh, thank you. What's your name? You're Jane.
Jane, yes.
Hello, Jane. Thank you.
You're
Okay.
welcome. Okay, my word was fear. And here's my story, or at least first paragraph. I needed an onion. The recipe called for an onion, and the only one I had in the fridge had dried out weeks ago. The produce market is just down the street. I have a mask. I would be the only one. I would only be there to get the onion and get out. I could do it, no problem. End of story.
That's a story. That's a flash fiction story. So thank you, Jane. Now, how did that story come to you, and were you aware of shaping it as a story or not? Again, there's no wrong answers here.
Well, it's true, so that helped.
Yeah.
And then, you know, then once it's true, and you know what you're talking about, you just go with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's brilliant. You've put it, yeah, so perfectly, because I think in fiction is of course made up, but there has to be an element of emotional truth. You have to actually, and that's what the hard work of being a writer is, actually not constructing the story, but finding, in my view anyway, finding the emotional truth of your character, or of yourself if you're writing about yourself. But there's a really interesting intervention in your story, the presence of a mask. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You could argue that if we were doing this exercise 6 months ago, the mask wouldn't be there.
Right.
If I can just ask you, what does that mask mean to your story, if anything, the presence of that mask?
Well, I actually think that's where all the tension is, because, well, I mean, masks are pretty contentious here, and whether one wears it or not can determine whether you're going to go out and like enter society or whether you're just going to continue to live in captivity.
Yeah, absolutely. I see what you're saying. I mean, I think if we could all just reflect here on a moment from just our two, our brief shares that we've had now from you participants. It's this very simple exercise in its two chapters that I've asked you to do has tapped into some really, I think, quite deep and important things that affect our lives now, but things that affect human life at all times, the choice between freedom and diktat, history and how we become, and how things change. There's some very, very profound questions, I think, amongst us in these very simple exercises, which have been, I might remind you, provoked by a single word in both times. So not much. We haven't had much to go on, but it's opened up a wellspring. Yeah, thank you so much, Jane. So would anyone else like to equally share what they've done? And then I'm just going to say something very quickly about story construction, and then we'll go on to the Q&A. Anyone else would like to share with the group their story or their experience?
I'm extroverted, I'll share, as you mentioned earlier.
That's great, an extrovert, yeah. Hi, Kelly, thank you.
So my word was drip, So here we go. The bead of sweat rolls from her forehead to the fine tip of her nose. A brief pause. Then a sharp dive to the loamy ground where it is absorbed, much like the impending rainfall from the storm forming over the swamp. Another droplet forms as the last cascaded down. It too takes its sudden dive down. Forehead, nose, ground, forehead, nose, ground. The sweat comes in a torrent of its own rainfall now. She pauses, breathing hard as the sweat continues its fall from her face. And then I was very happy that you called time because yesterday this was, for context, I live in Florida. I was doing yard work in the middle of the day. It was extremely hot. I was very sweaty. But I felt like really talking about yard work after that would be really boring. And I felt like this was a part where my character or I needed to say something. And that was really going to be where the direction of the story would then head. So I felt like this was where my intervention would be, but I didn't really know where that was going. So like I said, I was happy you called time.
Yeah, but actually, I mean, if I could say in both you and Jane, you know, your both your feedback and your cases, the thing about story is you don't actually know where it's going. That's the other exciting thing about being a writer. You just have to trust in the process. And sometimes you do have a sort of sense, of course, you've created a character very quickly. In Jane's story, there's an immediate sense of suspense and in fact, symbolism with the onion. You know, the onion, what does the onion is something that makes you cry. I mean, you can just resonate out from these simple choices that you've made. But you've all gone with it. You've flowed with the story. And in your case, I mean, I think that's you've set it up beautifully as an episode, which is very lyrically described. There's a relationship between the heat and the tension of the rain and the inner state. The inner and the outer are mirrored and they come together. So there's an incredibly, basically the construction of narrative is fantastically complex, but also incredibly easy at the same time, because you've both established a character or a point of view, a speaker. There's a sense of place and time. There's a sense of action and there's a sense of conflict and suspense in both of those offerings. And you know, we've just done this in like 4 minutes, and this is what it's about, being a writer, folks. And you can do it. I guess this is the main thing I want to communicate. And also it's a great way of taking the temperature and the reading of your own thoughts and your own state of being. So it can be very, I hesitate to say therapeutic, but it's a serious enterprise of self-expression, self-understanding, and understanding of the world. So thank you so much, everybody, for doing this. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into the larger Q&A, where I really will turn this into a full-on writing workshop. But I really commend you all for taking the risk and doing this. And I'm sorry I don't have more time to feed back in a more kind of detailed form. So yes, any questions for myself? And in fact, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask Stephanie to reflect. Stephanie, of course, has done our course, and she's a very experienced writer now. So Stephanie, any reflections on the course itself and relating them to the workshop that we've just done?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I was just thinking about the comment you made about writing being therapeutic. And I think for me, writing is often a way of processing things. So yeah, I would say one of the first things that comes to mind with the course is that I think the highs are very high and the lows are very low, which is just true, I think, of writing in general. So yeah, I'm now in my second and final year of the MFA, and I would say it's been very rewarding. It's also definitely had its challenges. I do feel like my writing has improved. I'm certainly more conscious about things like craft and point of view. And I think probably two of the greatest strengths of the program for me were being connected to a community of talented international writers. I feel like even the first workshops, I was very blown away by the quality of my peers, and that was actually with Jean in 2018, I guess. Yeah. But I do think that you stay in touch with your classmates, and you do find people to kind of keep sharing work with. We actually had a Jean workshop reunion Jean doesn't know about this, but we have a WhatsApp group from our first workshop, and we had one just this past weekend. So, you know, you stay in touch and you have friends who are continuing on that journey with you. That's probably actually the highlight, I think, because you take it with you. But certainly another strength of the program is that in the UK, it's well known and connected to the literary world. So if you are looking to get connected with UK agents, I think it's certainly a good place to start. I do think, you know, there are pros and cons to any kind of international postgrad study. So your own goals should certainly inform what program you choose. For me, I was specifically looking for a creative writing program in the UK. And so UEA was an obvious choice on the list, both because it's the oldest creative writing program in the UK, and also it's home to one of my favorite authors, Kazuo Ishiguro. So yeah, I think those are probably the highlights. I'm certainly happy to talk about any questions that you have, and I will try my best to answer honestly and thoroughly. Other than that, I think I probably have a more realistic understanding of creative writing from the course, as well as the publishing world, but for better or worse. And yeah, it's been a good journey. So.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. And I mean, I have to say to everybody here that you know, Stephanie is really exemplary. She's an incredibly talented writer. She's very eloquent and of, you know, incredible professional experience as well. But I think within the workshop, what happens is that you discuss other people's work and you have your own work discussed. So you have to be a kind of dual creature, and that's what our course, I think, creates, is writers who can write, and they can also honestly and authentically appreciate the work of their peers and express that. And it's some people come fully formed, able to talk at a very high critical level about other people's work. But I think it's also a learning experience that people establish, as well as a trust. They establish a way of talking about writing, a vocabulary. And that's, I think, a very good skill that the course is able to give people to take forward. So I've got a question from Moira here in the chat box, and I'll take that in a moment. Are there any other immediate questions? Okay, right. So I'll say to everybody, Moira Egan would like to know, there's two different programs, the MA and the MFA. And in fact, Stephanie's doing the MFA. What is the difference between the two? And also, what's the difference between the exercises from a writing pedagogical point of view? Good question, very good question. So I'll ask Stephanie to weigh in here, but I'll just say briefly, the MA is a one-year course and the MFA is a two-year course. Stephanie's actually done both, because you do the MA first in the MFA and then you go on and do the MFA. But Stephanie, maybe if you could reflect, what's the MFA been like for you, the second year part of it?
Sure, yeah. Well, as Jean said, the first year is essentially the MA. And then the second year is, I mean, my understanding is that it was partly developed thinking about the MFAs in the US. The structure is much more independent the second year. So I actually really appreciate the second year, because the first year is very intense. And I think most people will say it feels very fast as well. And particularly as someone who hadn't ever really given creative writing a full-time priority, I think the second year helped me process a lot of the first year. It's essentially, I would say the two main components are, there's supervision. So you're working one-on-one with a supervisor who is teaching at the university. Mine was Tessa McWatch. And instead of, whereas the first year is a lot of, you're submitting work and being workshopped, the workshop component is removed. And instead you have these one-on-one tutorials. And you're working on one project, whereas in the first year you could be working on however many projects you choose. So the goal of the second year is essentially to get you into 60 to 80,000 word manuscript, presumably a novel or a collection of short stories. That's if you're on the fiction strand, I guess. And then the other component is that there's a pedagogy element where you are I guess, learning how to teach creative writing, essentially. And you meet maybe once a month with Andrew Cowan, who is also, a teacher in creative writing, and talk about the basics of how you would go about running a workshop yourself if you were being a creative writing teacher in the future, because this is how many creative writers make money or sustain their creative writing. And yeah, that also involves in the second term kind of an adjunct teaching component, which is fairly minor, but is still helpful if you want some experience teaching.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I mean, Stephanie's really said it all. That is the difference between them. MFA is obviously twice the commitment in time and in money, but it has a very different, it allows you to develop a full-scale project that is of a publishable standard and publishable length. I think with regard to the question about, do people come off the BA and then enter the MA or the MFA at our university, the answer is not very often. The standard of writing for a program is very high, and it often means that you need a bit of life experience to be able to meet it in a nutshell. But we do sometimes have preternaturally talented 22 and 23-year-olds on the course. It's true, but the average age of the course is about 29 or 30. But we're open to everybody. It's about talent rather than age. With regard to the question about the writing exercises, the first exercise is about tapping into your stream of consciousness, if you will, the things that you are perhaps thinking about. The second exercise is about asking you to form that material, if the same kind of responding to a word, but actually form it to think about the needs of story. Now, clearly I'm doing this super fast, but it is, I guess it's a demonstration of the two things. You need a left brain and a right brain to be a writer. You need to be creative, you need to be open, you need to be able to think completely freely, if you will, free of constraints and expectations, but you also need to form that material. You need to shape it. Even when writing poetry, you need to shape it into something that's intelligible. And those skills and abilities are sometimes opposed. And so I'm just trying to introduce, I guess, both elements of being a writer to you through the exercises. So, is it most common for people to have post-baccalaureate experience? Yeah, I mean, being a writer, it's not about being an academic. It's a different course. This is about creative practice. You need to have an inner imaginarium that you can draw upon. You need to have that, I suppose. And what's talent? We could debate that all day. But being a writer it's about sensibility. It's a way of being in the world. And yes, our course does, through us teaching, because we teach as writers, we teach as these strange creatures. We try to, through a kind of osmosis, just communicate that to our students. What it is to be, what is the project of being a writer in the world? So it's more about lived experience than academic experience. So thank you, everybody. I think we're coming close to the end. And Alana, do we have any other Q&As, questions rather, from people?
So I don't think we pulled in anything else, but if you do have, as I mentioned, if you do have any general questions, please feel free to send those through to us. Again, UEA does have other programs other than creative writing. Obviously, creative writing is amazing, but we do want to stress too that there are other programs for students to study. So if you just have general ones, I think one comes. So housing for students. So I was going to say, Stephanie can answer this too a little bit, but I know from my experience, we have students who are on campus and off campus. It really is a personal decision for the student. There's a lot of places for students to live in Norwich, which is very easy to get around by bike. It's very walkable. Also, there's the bus transportation system. And then we have a wide variety of campus options, and postgraduate students can actually live anywhere on campus that they would like to. So again, that really is a personal choice. When I speak to students, I just let them know what there is. And at the end of the day, it's ultimately their decision. But yeah, there definitely are on-campus accommodation options for students. And then Stephanie, if you just want to mention really quickly about your experience or also any of the friends that you have.
Sure, yeah. I think in my year, the first year, most students chose to rent a room outside of the UEA campus. So they would basically share a house with other students in what is known as the Golden Triangle, which is kind of this midway area between UEA and Norwich, the city. And yeah, I think a lot of students do end up finding accommodation around Norwich. There are also some who commute from London. I think those are mostly people who already are living in London, but can make the commute up. I actually, for most of my course, lived in Cambridge, which is also a fairly easy commute. That was primarily because my spouse lives in Cambridge and was doing stuff that kept him there. And ironically have now moved to Norwich, also for his employment situation. So both are great places to live. I think there were also a couple other students who lived in Cambridge during my time as well.
Okay, so we do have a couple more questions that have popped in. So Robin asks for international development and climate change program. I'm guessing those would be a bit more open to those who just received a bachelor's. So yeah, I would say those are going to be the vast majority of our programs. Again, it's hard with creative writing just because they usually do want that portfolio that is typically created after the bachelor program is completed. Those might be a little bit more open to students, but obviously the students have to be qualified for the program requirements and have any related degrees that might be required for that specific program. But yeah, if you do have any questions too, I was going to say, so with these contact details, you'll see at the bottom right hand of your screen, there's an Ask a Student and also an Ask an Academic feature that we have on the website. So if you do have any specific questions or want to guide any current students or any of our academics in specific programs, those are very excellent resources for people to connect directly with either A, current students, such as Stephanie, or B, academics like Jean, kind of in a little bit of a less formal environment. And then the second question, Alana mentioned to me that there are lots of funding opportunities, and could you just say a bit more about that? So in addition to, obviously with the Fulbright and Marshall, which are full, we do have generous scholarship offerings, again, in terms of, I think, what other universities offer. So there's the International Excellence Scholarship that I do believe requires an additional essay, but that's open to all postgraduate students to apply for. And that's £4,000 for the year typically, because the postgraduate talks are just 1 year long. There are also a wide array of other scholarships that students can apply for. That's the most general one, but creative writing, I know, and international development are actually two of our programs with some of the most robust scholarship offerings in the university. And those tend to be some of our more popular programs. But again, it does kind of vary depending on the student and what they're going into. Also, we do have other scholarships. I know typically here we're talking again to the US and Canadian, potentially not even Canadian, but the US market. We do have other scholarships for international students if they do hold, other citizenship from another country, if you happen to be working with an international student. So it's just really worth going on our website and perusing those, because I find a lot of our students usually end up with some form of scholarship. The other thing that's worth mentioning, and I know Claire, my colleague who's on here, would appreciate this, but we have the North American Partnership Award, which I believe is an automatic scholarship that goes to an alumni of any one of the study abroad partner schools that we have a relationship with, and that's automatic. So for example, I'm trying to think, I think University of Kansas is on there. If you are a graduate of University of Kansas and apply to one of our programs and get an offer, you automatically get that scholarship. And I believe it's rated at £3,000. So it's really nice to have those funding opportunities available. And like you said, Jean had that long list of scholarships. I always feel like my creative writing students are well taken care of. There's lots of opportunities. I think for this year, are those scholarships all awarded at this point? Do you know, Jean?
They're all awarded, yes, for the coming year. We award them, now is our deadline, July 31st, yeah. They will have to be awarded by then. But we have even more coming on stream next year. We're incredibly, again, successful in terms of attracting donor funding. And so we offer about typically a little bit more than a third of our cohort. We take 30 to 36 new students on the MA every year. And of those students, just over a third have some kind of award. It might not cover all their international fees, but for example, students from the United States are eligible for a number of scholarships. Again, they might not cover the entire thing, overseas fees and maintenance, but every little helps.
Yep. And to mention too, again, it's worth noting that our programs are 1 year as opposed to the US where they're typically the 2-year programs. So that's going to save students time, and our fees tend to be very comparable and very price sensitive in comparison to some of the other options that you can have here in the US too. So that's always, a good point for both undergraduate and postgraduate students. Was there anything else? I know we have some links going up. Thanks so much to Mary and Claire.
Could I just make the point as well, Alana? I think you might have said this, apologies if you have. Norwich is actually a very reasonably priced city to live in. Stephanie's just been living in Cambridge, now she's moved to Norwich. She might notice a difference. It's quite an economical city. The UK is very expensive in general, but Norwich actually bucks the trend. You can live for a lot less there than anywhere else, in my experience.
Yeah, and I think it is quite a magical city. Again, our students fall in love with it. I was going to share this story earlier and totally forgot about it, but our 2018 Fulbright, and I think this is a good note to leave on too, but our 2018 Fulbright who came in, his name was Alex. He did his studies in international development. I think it was rural development. He's actually now studying his medical degree in Tennessee, but he loved Norwich so much that he actually found a residency program so he can find his way back to Norwich and Norfolk, because he just fell in love with it so much while he was at UEA for just his year. So I think that goes to speak very well to the experience that our students have and the love that they end up having for, not just UEA, but again, the area in which they live. So we invite you, if you do have any follow-up questions, Jean's email is there, my email is there for any general queries that you might have. And also we have shared Stephanie's email too, great for that student experience. But I unfortunately was never a student at UEA, so I always refer to students who can talk about that experience a lot better than obviously my observations of their experience. So feel free to, again, let us know if there are any questions that you have. And again, thank you so much, for taking the time out of your summer schedule to meet with us and to participate in our workshop. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks everybody for doing that. I think that was really amazing. Thank you so much for that. We will be sharing the slides, the film and the chat, so you can get those links as well. Thank you very much everybody for coming this evening. Thank you Alana and Jane and everybody else who participated. That was fantastic, and I look forward to seeing many of you next week, and hopefully Alana, we'll see you in UEA at some point in the future. Thank you very much.
Definitely. Take care everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you, everyone. And yes, we'll be visiting Nottingham next week. On, July 27th visit. So, yeah. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Dr.
Bye.
Mcneil
Bye,
and